Leona and Simon lived and worked in Moscow, Russia. They had a well-paid and stressful job. They also got to know each other through their work. Leona was the brand representative of the company they both worked for, and Simon was in sales. And as luck would have it, they bumped into each other when they met. It lit up from the very beginning. Simon liked how beautiful she was and how light and relaxed she seemed. And Leona couldn't resist Simon's mischievous charm. Soon they were meeting again and again. Until one day they became a couple. Simon and Leona were really a strong couple. They ran the business they worked for. They lived in a big luxury house, drove luxury cars and attended very expensive parties. They really lived in luxury. But nothing could compare to the day Leona found out she was pregnant. She and Simon weren't necessarily trying to conceive a child. But now that she was pregnant, they were overjoyed. They will be able to bring the child into their ideal world, and their family will be complete. But when Leona and Simon were looking forward to the birth of a child, tragedy struck. The company they both worked for suddenly collapsed. The company ran out of money, which meant that all employees, including Simon and Leona, literally became unemployed overnight. It was a crushing blow. And her balloon burst completely unexpectedly. It wasn't long before the couple was financially exhausted. They could no longer attend the parties they used to have or go to the bars they used to go to. They even had to give up their large apartment and move to a smaller house outside the city near the forest. It was a sad and terrible accident. But Leona and Simon didn't give up. Because they wanted their child to have a chance at a happy life. Therefore, they moved to a small remote house and temporarily worked odd jobs. Although the family had little money at the time, they were not unhappy. In front of the couple realized that there is more to life than just money and wealth. They appreciated a good neighborhood, which they did not know in the big city, and learned to appreciate the little things of life. Simon also started hunting in the nearby forest. There were a lot of deer in the area, and the meat was very tasty, and we had enough for a few weeks. But one day a man came across an animal that he did not expect. A huge, hungry wolf. The wolf seemed to be chasing the same game as Simon, but the sound of the shot startled him. The animal was looking at him through the trees. But instead of pointing a gun at him, Simon did something unexpected. He offered the dead animal to the wolf. He clearly needed it more urgently than he did. The wolf sniffed the carcass and looked gratefully at Simon. Then he dragged the meat into the depths of the forest. Simon was often in the woods, but he had never seen a wolf. It must have been a chance meeting, but he remembered it for the rest of his life. A few months later, Simon's cell phone started ringing. It was Leona who went into labor. When Simon rushed to the hospital, Leona had already given birth to a beautiful baby girl. Simon was delighted with this little man they had created. He had never been so happy, even when they were rich and living their wonderful lives. This little girl was now his goal in life, and he and Leona would raise her well. They named their daughter Kira. The couple took good care of their child. They fed them, loved them, and were the best parents they could be. But one day, when Simon was walking with Kira in a child's seat, something tragic happened. It was a stormy and windy day. Suddenly, a tree fell right in front of the car. Simon didn't have time to react and crashed into a tree trunk at high speed. The car overturned and the man hit his head on the glass. When the car stopped, he lost consciousness. When he woke up, he was a little dazed and confused. Fortunately, he didn't suffer any serious injuries and took a quick look at Kira to make sure she was okay too. But she wasn't there. Where was she? What happened while he was unconscious? In a panic, Simon crawled out from under the rubble and began to search for his newborn baby. But there was no trace of her. Simon grabbed his phone and called Leona to tell her what had just happened. She immediately called 911 and rushed to the scene of the accident to find her child. When paramedics arrived at the scene of the accident, Simon refused medical attention. All he cared about was finding his little girl. She was so young, vulnerable, and innocent, and it broke Simon and Leona's heart to think that she was out there somewhere. The police immediately began a systematic search for the girl in the area. But as night approached, it became clear that Kira was nowhere to be found. Neither Simon nor Leona wanted to put up with such an answer and searched all night through wind, rain and darkness. But the next morning brought answers that no one expected. Instead of searching the streets, Simon made his way into the woods near the scene of the accident. He scanned the surroundings before moving further and further away. And when he was searching in a particularly dense forest, Simon discovered something important. The blanket that Kira was wrapped in. He let out a panicked sigh. Why was she so far away in the forest? He ran to her, picked her up and hugged her to him. It was wet and dirty, but it definitely belonged to Kira. At that moment, he heard a noise behind him. Simon turned slowly and collided with the wolf. But not any wolf. It was the one he had met the week before. His heart sank. But not because he was afraid for his life. The reason Simon felt so depressed was because a piece of Kira's dress was hanging out of the wolf's mouth. Had this hungry wolf really eaten his cub? He couldn't bear the thought of it. But the wolf turned and walked slowly away, as if inviting Simon to follow him. Simon ran after him, afraid of what he would find. The thought flashed through his mind again that wolves are ferocious predators. And he held back tears as he followed the beast. But when he walked around a large tree and looked into a small hole, Simon fell to his knees. Because Kira was lying there. She was crying and screaming while lying there. Her clothes were wet, torn and dirty. Simon ran up to Kira, took her in his arms and began to cry. He couldn't believe she was still alive. But why was she so far away in the forest? The wolf must have witnessed the accident and done the unthinkable. He pulled the child out of the wrecked car and took him to a safe place. It must have been the wolf's instinct as a parent to protect a small child. Simon looked at the wolf, who slowly bowed his head. Simon could never be sure, but it seemed that the wolf reciprocated his kindness by offering him food when he needed it most. Before leaving the forest and returning to Leon, Simon whispered a word of thanks to the wolf. He will never be able to reciprocate, but he will certainly never forget this kind and incredible act.